Fenway Rundown, December 22nd. We told you at the end of last week we would be back potentially with an emergency podcast. We were going to do one early this week anyway. But I guess this qualifies, Sean, as the Red Sox make their third move of note, either tied for first or second in terms of most notable moves they have made. Late last night, the news breaks. It is not an out of nowhere addition. It is an expected one, really, and we'll get to that. Red Sox have acquired, at this point unofficially, Willson Contreras from the Cardinals. Three pitchers going back. Um, Dobbins, Fajardo, and Aida. He was a sixth-round pick a couple years ago. It's four letters. You should be able to
You
pronounce it,
you
but
say Iata, I say Iata.
Ada.
Let's call the
Blake Ada. Blake is his first name. But he's not the main piece of the deal. Red Sox get their first bat. This broke a little bit before the Patriots game started last night, of course. And as of now, it's not announced. We were going to wait until Craig Breslow talked about this to do the pod. They are just working through some formalizing things on, and once that deal is announced, Breslow will talk. But for now, we'll try to fill in all the gaps we can. It's not like we don't know all the pieces of the deal before he speaks. So, Sean, of course, you were off and enjoying some family time last night. Jumped on to write your five thoughts about the deal. But what is your main thought about the Willson Contreras deal of being traded to the Red
well.
Sox?
I think it is a move in the right direction. I think it makes them better, as the trade for Sonny Gray did. I would put the Oviedo trade in kind of a separate box.
Yeah.
To me, Gray and Contreras are the two big acquisitions so far. It settles first base. It gives them a right-handed hitter, but I don't mean to be dour here. I think it's a decent move. I don't think it's an unbelievable move or a huge upgrade. My concerns are that while people look at this as, the object was to get a run producing power bat, I'm not sure that he fits that profile. I mean, he's a good major league hitter. He's an above average major league hitter, but this is a guy who's hit more than 22 home runs twice. Some of that is we can chalk up to playing time as a number one catcher, where obviously you're not going to be getting into 145 or 150 games as a catcher. But, even last year, the OPS is under 800. And, the slug is usually around 450. Good, not great. Better than what they had, gives them an experienced bat, a guy who's been part of a winning team. All positive, someone who we presume, and we'll find out more about this later, can at least help out in a pinch behind the plate. He did not catch a single inning a year ago, but as recently as 24, caught 51 games. So physically, he can still do it. How much, if at all, the Red Sox envision him catching. But if they get anything out of that, that's a plus flexibility wise. As I said, I'm not trying to rain on everyone's parade. Good hitter, good player, but they need more. And I'm not sure this guy's much of a difference maker.
Yeah, I think he has the potential to be. You're looking at, I think, back of baseball card stats with him, not you, the collective you, and they don't jump off the page. If you look at StatCast, it's really, really red across the board.
Yep.
Hard hit rate, all that type of stuff. Um, bat speed has not slowed down as he's gotten into his early to mid 30s, which is a good indicator that'll continue. Pulling the ball in the air is going to play at Fenway. If you look at the spray chart, I think that's always a little overdone. You see some of these, if he was at Fenway, it would have hit, 88 home
73
runs.
home
Right.
runs.
I mean, there's probably going to be an uptick
Yeah.
in that. So I think he does add, as a step to helping the lineup. I think he's, a guy that, they wanted right-handed pop, right-handed run producer, a guy that fits in the middle of the lineup, as we talked about. Is he the superstar addition? No. But once I think Schwarber and Alonso were off the board, they were looking at, trying to maybe add two pretty good bats instead of the one, ridiculously expensive one in their mind with Alonso. So here's where I do like it, I think, more than you do. And acquisition cost aside, we'll get to that. I think that we have been obsessing on this show and in writing in private conversations about like the search for a complete player, the search for somebody who, everybody has flaws in their game,
Right.
obviously. Alonso, my issue with him was you can't play him at first base if your intent in improving your infield defense. And I know Contreras really only played there last year, but in terms of range, in terms of arm strength, in terms of a lot of these stats that are good indicators, he was a guy that was pretty good.
Yeah,
I know
the
the deep,
defensive run saved was not great, but outs
right?
above average was above average.
Yeah.
Range was very good. I think he had the second best range of any first baseman in the
Hmm.
National League. So I'm not deducting any points here on defense. I think he'll be, you know, average to above average, which is
Yeah.
fine. You just
Well,
want
that's
some
that's what I mean. This is a team that has really barely had that at first base for a
true.
long time.
Yep.
And when you talk about ways to improve the infield defense, okay, let's project, which we're going to talk about this. I'm not projecting, but let's say Bregman comes back at third and Story is at short. And if you go into this with Bregman, Story, the same group you had last year on the left side, a year older, Meyer at second, which would probably be an upgrade, and then, um, probably we'll get to this, but I would guess Romy Gonzalez plays a lot of second in this new format too if Bregman comes back. And Contreras at first, that's a better group defensively,
No
no
question.
question. And so to me, that's a goal that it's hard to add somebody that fits into this and makes you markedly better. Alonso wouldn't have been that guy. And I do have my concerns, everybody talked about age, and obviously part of it is not wanting to spend top dollar and 35 million a year, 30 million a year for these guys, whatever it is, 31 for him. But I think part of their hesitancy there probably had to do with defense and him wanting to play first base and knowing that, this is an important position that people seem to discount, and he's horrible over there. So Contreras is a lot better than Alonso would have been at first. That being said, he's not the same bat, he's not the same power hitter. But there's no perfect player. I think the floor on both sides of the ball for Contreras is relatively high, and for the acquisition cost, I think it does make sense. I think people look at this offseason from they're going to get Alonso and Joe Ryan, and they targeted those names, or Schwarber and Cole Ragans or whatever. And right now it's Gray, Contreras, Oviedo. I don't think the picture is complete. Contreras makes them better, and it's a move I like. We can get into the return, but I don't know. I've gone back and forth over this in the last 12 hours, 15 hours, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
I don't think we're
Would
saying
I?
I don't think we're saying terribly
Yeah.
different things.
Well, would you rather have them done the Alonso deal for what they did, or the Contreras deal for the price? Like
Yeah,
I don't think it's like one is would far surpass the other in my
yeah,
mind.
I agree. I agree. I mean, they're paying him about
17.
55% of what
Right.
they would have paid Alonso, a little more than half. It ends up being in the area of 17 million instead of 31 million. Um, so in that regard, uh, there's a significant difference there. And as you point out, the defense will be better. Contreras' strikeout numbers are a little high, but they're not anything that would set off any alarm bells. Alonso, for a power hitter, actually the strikeout numbers are okay. Schwarber's are, of course, very, very high. You're going to get 200 strikeouts there. So, look, professional hitter is kind of a cliche, but it's what I would apply here.
Matt Stairs.
And well, he'd better be better than Matt Stairs. I understand the reference, but I still think that what we have to emphasize is there's got to be more, because this maybe brings them back to where they were on October 3rd. If Contreras is a similar bat to that of Bregman, and obviously Bregman's a better defender than Contreras is, but from an offensive standpoint, they're only back to where they were. Now they have to get better. And whether that involves a trade for Marte or bringing Bregman back or somebody else, there needs to be another significant offensive piece to have this all make sense.
Yeah, and look, you can look at it. And it's December 22nd. It's still, I look at January 1st, it's kind of the midpoint of the off season because, December and January are really the two active months. We see moves in November, we see moves stretch into February, like with Bregman, but a lot of good free agents are still available. The trade market has still barely moved, even though the Red Sox have made only trades. There are still ways to upgrade and help the team. Um, are they better than they were when the season ended? With you swap out Gray for Giolito and Bregman for Contreras, probably right around the same or a little worse. But
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
all
I would
expecting,
say the rotation's better and deeper,
yeah,
and I would say the offense is about even.
yeah. Well,
You know,
I mean, probably a little worse, um, but
well,
that's what illustrates the point you're making of what's next. We'll
yeah,
come back to that. The return,
yeah. I
Dobbins.
have no issue. To me, they didn't overpay here, which factors into my assessment. It's not like they look. Hunter Dobbins is a great kid. He's probably in a best case scenario a number four, more likely kind of a number five. What they did was strip themselves, or what they've done is strip themselves of two decent depth options. That's who Fitz and Dobbins were. They don't have anywhere near the ceiling that Early and Tolley do, maybe not even Kyle Harrison. So they didn't touch their elite pitching prospects to get three deals done. I think they deserve some credit there. We may be saying in June when a bunch of injuries strike the rotation, boy, they could use Richard Fitz and Hunter Dobbins right now.
The game we were playing with Quinn Priester in September.
Right. But I don't think they overpaid here. I think it was a reasonable ask and a reasonable return. I don't think anybody's going to be, kind of gnawing at their knuckles over the loss of Hunter Dobbins. No disrespect to him. He's a back end guy who could be valuable, but wasn't going to be a member of a championship caliber rotation, probably, or if he was, at best, a number five guy.
I'm higher on him than that. I mean, I think this guy has ceiling based on mentality, bulldog nature, intangible stuff like that. Like to see a kid like that, sometimes in a ruffle feathers way, kind of embrace everything that came with his rookie year and everything. Like there's something there where he's got kind of the it factor to me of
Yeah,
a competitor,
I don't disagree with that.
and that to me raises the ceiling on some of these on a guy like that. And
Yeah,
and he also did pitch pretty well, in a lot in an extended major league sample. Wasn't just good AAA numbers. So
but
I could
don't
see
you
that
think
one.
this is a guy who profiles as a high three, low four ERA?
Yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of value in today's game for that. I know they have a lot of these guys. I just, it's not like a to me, Fitz was like on the outside looking in. Dobbins is a guy that I could have seen breaking, the rotation out of camp if, like,
Potentially.
and then,
My main takeaway though is they didn't touch
right.
Toley or Early
And
to do
right,
these
but I don't
deals.
think any of us thought that was going to have
Well,
to
I
happen for
mean, depends on
Contreras.
who they, if they make a trade for Marte,
No, I
one of
mean
those
for
guys
yeah,
might still.
For Contreras, they weren't going to have to deal
No,
with
no,
these
no,
guys.
of
Yeah.
course not. But they didn't overpay, and they didn't have to break the glass and trade away one of their top pitching prospects.
Yeah. So Fajardo, exactly a year ago, they got in a trade for Cam Boozer. He had an excellent year, rookie ball in single A, barely 19, and had an excellent year. I saw Keith Law write today that if he was coming out of the draft, he'd probably be taken in the first round right now. So that's an
Yeah,
interesting
it's
comp.
a live arm with the
Yeah.
potential to, be pretty good, but be pretty good in 3 years.
Right, or more, and then
Yep.
Blake Ada, we'll still figure it out. Uh, our crack editing team, which is me, will have to deal with that later on. I so he's more of a organizational piece, but really the focus on Dobbins and Fajardo. I mean, with Fajardo, it's kind of you're looking at the exact same. Obviously, they do get the third piece, so it's a little bit different than the Gray trade, but it's basically a major league ready guy and a long term, a very high upside prospect, as Clark was in the Gray trade.
Yep.
Fajardo will be, and Heimblum will get to figure this all out because he now has 5 Red Sox pitching prospects in his pipeline. So I think with the return, I think it's fair. I think the two main takeaways I have big picture return wise. Number one, like if you're gonna trade Tolley or Early in one of these big packages, whether that's for people talk about Cole Reagans, of course, people talk about Marte, people talk about, in the pipe dream, which you shut down, Scooble, definitely, these high end people. I think that not just this one, but all the moves you've made have to lessen the appetite, if there was one, to do that for Tolley or Early. Because if you think about, who they've stripped, it's obviously, Fitz and Dobbins. Also Perales. They got Bennett, different, but, Perales is closer to the majors probably than Bennett.
Yep.
They lost Criswell in a waiver claim, not a
They,
big
they've
deal, but
they've taken away some of their own safety net.
and then from the safety net, but also like the upside at the other levels from Clark to Fajardo, to some of these other kind of high upside. They lost Paez in the Rule 5 draft. They have been decimated. It's not the right word because they have a lot of intriguing arms there, but they have been kind
Hit
of
hard.
hit hard. So that, to me, moving on from Tolley or Early, when you have Dobbins and Fitz and all these guys in the minors, um, makes a little bit more sense. The other thing on that, I guess it's three parts to this long-winded takeaway. You've given up three mid-range top 10 prospects so far, and Perales, the password, and now Fajardo, obviously Clark right on that, around there too. When you look at that, to me, there's always a second guess that can be made of, could you have packaged like Luis Perales and Justin Garcia and Fajardo and gotten somebody better
One
than
big impact guy.
Gray or Contreras? That's a question that's worth being asked as we move forward. Also, one of these guys or two of these guys that he's traded for going back to the deadline in 2024 is going to end up being pretty good somewhere because they've just dealt so many of them, even beyond the Kyle
Yeah,
Teals of the
law of
world.
averages.
And then I think the big takeaway is we've seen this sliding scale deal now done twice, where, to me, while true, and I know you wrote this in your thoughts, the whole like he hasn't dipped into free agency thing is a little overdone because he has taken on, a
Yeah, well, I
$21
mentioned
million
that.
dollar.
I
Right.
talked about the fact that they are taking money on, obviously, with both Gray and with Contreras now.
But it's interesting to me that they've structured the deal the same way where, it's always that if you pay more of the deal, Heim you'll get better prospects. And if you pay less of the deal, you get worse prospects. And so with Gray, they take on half of that. His was an exorbitant 41. So, that kind of had to be part of that. The Red Sox could have probably given them worse players and taken on Contreras' whole deal. So, my question to you, Sean McAdam, and the greater public out there is that good business or is that a sign of where the Red Sox are financially and not a good sign?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat troubling that they are insisting on having some of this subsidized. You're right. Gray was overpriced, even as highly priced and valued as a number two A, whatever starter is. It would have been exorbitant to pay him $41 million with the money, the reworked.
And that's just how his contract was backloaded. So just kind
Right.
of, yeah.
Right, but that's the reality of what
Yeah.
they would have taken on, and I understand what they did there. But the one last night is kind of like, is $4 million a year really that big a deal here? Are they saving money for an offer on Bregman? Are they saving money to take on Marte's money? We won't know until a few more weeks, probably. But it is alarming that is a ruling concept here. It's like, whoa, before we do this deal, we want you to take some money back. And we know, as you pointed out, that's going to involve giving up better prospects because it's one or the other. You either take all the money and give less or get some of the money taken back and have to give them more. They're making an intentional decision here to prioritize payroll and money, and it does make you wonder where that's headed.
Yeah. And that's, I think, how we'll get into what's next. But I think part of me thinks, like, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that it's good business that, well, you have to spend on the contract, but if you can get, $4 million back on the CBT, that's important. And, if you're willing still
Right,
to
but
deal the
but those
guy.
things don't operate in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You're doing that at the cost of having to give them better prospects in return.
And the reality is, should the Boston Red Sox have to do that? I mean,
Mm.
probably not, you know. So I think, you know, the payroll picture is always a little bit fuzzy. We've tried to break through that fuzz over the last few years. Um, but it is an interesting thing where, like, you know, they have clearly, you know, like there's a world in which, you know, if money's not an object, you take on 35 on Gray and you don't have to give up maybe Clark, right? Like that's the way these things work. Or you take on the entirety of Contreras and you can bump Fajardo down to a little worse prospect, you know. And obviously takes two to tango, and Heim had to take the deal that was best, where you know he's basically buying prospects with some
Yep.
of that 4 million a year too. Um, I think it's interesting they've chosen this specific threading the needle path of a trade that involves significant finances, obviously more in the case of Gray, twice instead of, you know, doing the straight up trade with no money, which was Oviedo, but that's a different case, or a free agent signing, you know. And so that kind of, you know, goes back to that question of Alonso didn't have a pick attached this year because he was a free agent last year. So would you rather do 31 times 5 for Alonso and that's all you're paying, or do 17.25 for 2 years for Contreras? I think that's a huge deal for them, 2 years versus 5 in their minds, not
Yeah, I, I,
plus the
I
three
think that the
prospects.
driving issue here is length, or more accurately, uh, brevity
Yeah.
of the deals they're inheriting.
Yeah.
Gray is 1 year essentially, and Contreras is two with an option. Um, they're not extending themselves to guys in their 30s beyond the short term.
Right.
And it does make you wonder if they don't capitalize on this window. And look, really, in some ways, the window is just cracking open now with Roman having half a year of service time and Meyer and the same deal and others on the doorstep, Early, Tolley, all those guys. There is a nucleus that is going to emerge, but you have taken on two 30 something guys who are only here for a year and 2 years, respectively, which suggests that, you have aims and goals of trying to win now.
Yep.
And that leads to okay, if you are declaring that you're going for it here by having a shorter window of these contracts that you're taking on and limiting your exposure and liability long term, are you committed to the bit? Are you going to add to what they have with Bregman or Marte or somebody to really make this team a pennant contender and not merely a wild card contender?
Yeah. So that's where we'll go next, where they go next. To me, Contreras doesn't really block off any of the options they were talking about. He was the, you know, one kind of first base DH mold. Of course, we'll get into where he's going to play more. I think Breslow's going to answer those questions later on today after we record this. So better to talk about then. He's not going to get an inning at third. He's not going to get an inning at second. Those situations remain unresolved. Oh, I do want to get to this. What does this mean for Casas in your mind?
It buys him additional recovery time, which he may
What a
well need.
positive spin on this.
Well, but that's just the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, now there's no hurry to rush him back. Not that I think they would have rushed a player who's physically compromised or not 100%, but he doesn't have to be ready for opening day now. And he may not be ready for opening day, given the severity and the complexity of that injury. To me, you can see him getting DH at bats when he's healthy. You can see him getting some playing time at first. I mean, a lot of this centers around how much do they see Contreras catching, if at all? Does he catch 10 games? Is he a guy that you move from first to behind the plate in the eighth after you hit for Connor Wong in a game you're trailing by a run? Does he start 30 games? Who knows? But obviously, Casas has a much less clear path to a real significant role here. At best, he gets some, occasional time at first against righties, and maybe some of those DH at bats. A lot of that is going to center on what happens to Yoshida. Do they get somebody to take him? Do they release him? Where does that go?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to look at it with, there's no room at full strength for Casas, Yoshida, and Contreras on this roster, really. I mean,
Wouldn't
I
seem
just
so.
no. And that's the issue they had last year when they moved Rafi to DH. Obviously, that solved itself in a way, and they had to basically bury Yoshida. It's just like, I know I harp on this, and I've gone on this for like 5 years, 4 years now, 3 years, whatever it is. Has anyone had a more bizarre existence in the Red Sox roster than Yoshida? I mean, just everything that's gone on and
Yep.
never seemed to fit, but he survives. That takes us to the next part of this. Still, they are at right around the first CBT threshold of 244 right now. They are 4 or 5 million short of where their payroll was a year ago in terms of CBT. Now, important caveat, and this is something I plan on exploring when things slow down a little bit, maybe next week. Their cash, because of the Anthony deal and some of these other contracts, the cash spending is not where the CBT number is. The Red Sox set their budget based on different things in different years, according to people who have dealt with that. So we're not sure where they stand in terms of what matters more between the cash and the CBT. All that is to say, you reported earlier in the year that they are hesitant to go and incur more penalties past what you're going to have to deal with to get past the first one. The target number that we've looked at is that 264, which is the second CBT threshold. They are, as of today, 20
20 million
million
under
short of
that.
that. And it's important to note, as you have on the pod, that you're supposed to leave room for trade deadline additions and different things that could pop up during the season. So they probably want to be, if they're aiming for that number, in the 257, 258. So, the two options there are they make another addition, somehow staying under that, which means maybe a salary dump somewhere else, or they blow past it and get into the 265, 270 range, which they should. Number one, I think we all think that. I know what you were told, and you know what you were told about incurring deficits. If they're past that, I think we both have our significant doubts, as I
Mm-hmm.
cracked wise about that with ticket sales and concession sales when we did that pod a few weeks ago. I think they should blow past it. The fans deserve them to blow past 265. They just sold the Penguins. It's bullshit if they don't. We all get that stuff. The question is, do we think they will? And if not, how do they stay under there and add a big secondary, and maybe not secondary bat, maybe a better bat than Contreras, but another piece here.
Yeah. Well, to answer your questions in order, we don't know what they're willing to do. Things change. What I was told about operating at a deficit once they're over the first CBT, people can be skeptical about that. You and I are skeptical about it. But if that's what they're saying and that's what they think, then that's going to drive some of their decision making. And it's hard to think that unless they get super creative, how they're going to get an impact bat for 17 or 18 million dollars. Now, maybe that's Marte.
Yeah.
That math works. And, we don't know if there would be a significant major league, is Duran part of that deal? That would offset what, nine and a half, $8-9 million? Seven. Okay. That would help a little bit. But if you're trading, if they want pitching and you're including either Early or Tolle, then that's not saving you any money because those guys are going to be at the major league minimum plus a couple of $1,000s. So that does not help them. And certainly they were creative on Bregman's deal a year ago with all the deferred money that brought it down closer to $30 million than the $40 million it was advertised as. But even 30 blows past that second CBT. And I think we can also acknowledge that Bregman's not going to get a $40 million AAV deal here, that it's going to be closer to maybe the low 30s. Maybe you structure it so that it's only low to mid 20s on the CBT. But again, that goes over if you don't make any other subtractions.
Mm-hmm.
So the math does not work right now unless they're adjusting and deciding, you know what, we're going to have to go over the second CBT. We're being driven by competition and expectations and fan pressure and where we are developmentally. A lot of things could change, but based on what we were told earlier, it's hard to see how the math works.
Yeah, well, the avenues to a salary dump, obviously Yoshida's the easiest at 18. It comes down to can you find a team to eat half of that and attach a prospect or something? And we've been on this. I've been on this for years. Secondarily, maybe a team wants to buy Patrick Sandoval and his 10 million off you. Who knows? Also, Duran, trade candidate. Rafaela is a guy with a CBT hit in that mid range. Bayo,
Jordan Hicks.
no one's trading for Jordan Hicks.
Well, I mean, if you
If you
take
attach
half
Connolly
of it,
early to Jordan Hicks, do you think someone acquires him for the full money?
what's that?
You attach Connolly early to Jordan Hicks. Do you think
Well,
someone?
you would hope that they don't get to that, but
I think it would. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know if I'd do that if I'm another team. So I'm kidding.
I'm just talking about overpriced contracts
Right.
that they could try to unload. Whether they're feasible or not is up to them to find out. But
Yeah.
obviously, that $12 million weighs heavily.
Yeah, and so I think those are all the avenues. Again, they should just blow past. They shouldn't have to figure out this stuff, but it comes down to if they're willing to. Marte is an interesting one because the math does work. It gets you closer, or a lot closer than the Bregman AAV would. But it goes back to my earlier point. When you keep ravaging this pipeline of arms, and Arizona wants arms, to me, you're less inclined to move totally in early than you were a couple weeks ago, 24 hours ago, not just because of Dobbins, but Fajardo and some of these upside guys below them. And, that to me, maybe they're just going to go say, hey, we built up this great pitching pipeline and now we're just going to send them all over the country for different pieces. I have my doubts. I think there's some guys that they're going to not want to move. But, if they're serious about the competitive window and they feel like Marte's that guy, especially if Bregman goes elsewhere, we will see. That's the Fenway rundown for. Do you have any more points, or we got it? We got it
I
good.
think I can go over my 5 best concerts
Yeah.
if you'd like.
If anyone wants that, that's on Friday's Section 10 podcast. With the it's kind of funny that we both had a forced Apple update from MassLive during that, and we've never had that during our own show, which is either good or bad depending on if you're an employer or not.
Maybe they're spying on us.
That's true. So, but that's the Fenway rundown for today and most likely the week. Want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Yeah, and we want to take this opportunity, Chris, because by the time we come back, likely it'll be very close to the new year.
Yeah.
Looking at the numbers,
unless they trade Bregman tomorrow, and then we have to redo this.
right? Unlikely they're going to trade Bregman, but maybe
sign
they
Bregman
sign
tomorrow.
him. Yeah, one never knows. They could sign him. It could be a sign and trade.
Yeah.
But the larger point is looking at some numbers today that more than 400,000 people downloaded this podcast in 2025. And for that, all sincerity, all complete sincerity on our part, we appreciate the loyalty and the devotion that people have to this pod. We have a lot of fun doing it. We had a lot of good feedback. We get some feedback that's not great, but that's okay.
Yeah.
That's part of the mix. But we want to sincerely thank listeners, regular or infrequent or occasional. Thank you for making this successful. Thank you for making it fun. And we hope the show continues to grow with your help.
Yep. Second all that. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody. Again, if there's another move, we'll be back. But other than that, this should take us through Christmas. Thanks for listening.